Welcome to our deep dive, everybody. Today, it's the Silk Road.
Oh, fascinating.
More than just like routes on a map, though, right?
Absolutely.
We're going on a journey through
Mhm.
time, trade, how ideas spread, all that.
The things that really shape the world.
We've got historical texts, museum guides, the works.
Even some insights into ancient technology. It's amazing what they accomplished.
I know. Our goal is to understand what life was really like on this network.
To really get a feel for it.
This legendary network thrived for over 1,500 years.
Wow. That's incredible. Longer than many empires.
It really shows how much people wanted to connect,
Absolutely. The Silk Road wasn't just about silk.
Right. It was spices, religions, technologies.
The very things that make our world what it is.
Exactly. So to really get this, we need to start at one of its hearts,
Okay, where are we headed?
Baghdad.
Ah, yes.
Our sources paint this incredible picture of Baghdad during the Abbasid dynasty.
A pivotal time.
And get this, bigger than any other city in the world at that time.
Wow. That's hard to imagine now.
I know. Our Baghdad guided tour really shows why.
Lay it on me.
Its location, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
Prime real estate. Right in the cradle of civilization, so to speak.
A natural hub for trade. And under Caliph al-Mansur,
A powerful figure.
Baghdad truly became the city of peace he envisioned.
You can feel the history there.
The source even talks about these massive walls around the city,
Really?
grand mosques, a palace for the caliph with like shimmering green domes.
You can almost picture it.
It really makes you wonder, what was it like, right?
To walk those streets?
To experience that energy.
A city that was at the center of the world.
Exactly. And here's the thing, the Abbasids,
Yes.
they weren't just rulers.
Powerful rulers at that.
They were patrons of knowledge, of culture.
Which brings us to...
The House of Wisdom.
Ah, yes. A legendary institution.
More than just a library. This was a global center.
Drawing scholars from everywhere.
Okay, so we've got this House of Wisdom. What's happening there?
Imagine ancient texts. Greek, Sanskrit, all these languages.
All in one place.
Precisely. Under Caliph al-Mamun.
Another big name.
They focused on translation, especially into Arabic.
But not just copying, right?
Right. More like a melting pot. Muslim, Christian, Jewish scholars
All working together.
debating, collaborating, building on each other's knowledge.
Wow. And were there any big names there?
This is where figures like Hunayn ibn Ishaq worked.
Tell me about them.
They produced groundbreaking anatomical drawings.
For medical stuff.
Exactly. Drawings used for centuries in universities across the world.
Really. Both East and West.
Absolutely.
So Baghdad was like an ancient Silicon Valley, but for knowledge.
That's a great way to put it.
And it was all thanks to the Silk Road bringing those minds together.
The impact of the House of Wisdom,
Yeah.
can be seen in how our universities are structured today.
Fascinating. Now let's follow the Silk Road eastward.
Where to this time?
Kashgar.
Kashgar, another important stop.
Our sources on Kashgar Buddhism and art reveal it as this vital stop.
And not just for trade this time.
Right. This time, it's the movement of a visual language. Buddhist art.
Think of it as, like, historical records frozen in time.
Oh, that's interesting.
They show us clothing styles, architecture, daily practices.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a window into their world.
And get this. The essay talks about Gandharan art.
I've heard of that.
It had a huge influence in Kashgar.
What's so special about it?
It's a fusion of Roman and Indian elements.
Really?
Originating in what's now Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Talk about a cultural crossroads.
It shows how the Silk Road wasn't just about moving stuff,
Right.
like silk or spices.
It was about aesthetics, ideas as well,
These motifs traveled so far.
evolving with each culture they met.
Our source dives into some specific images and their meanings, too.
Oh, which ones?
We've got the Fasting Buddha, Final Nirvana,
Powerful entry.
the Nara Daibutsu statue in Japan,
That one's massive, right?
and the Bodhisattva.
Each one embodying core Buddhist beliefs.
Let's break those down.
Okay, the fasting Buddha represents that path to enlightenment
Okay.
through self-denial and meditation.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about Final Nirvana?
It depicts the Buddha's transcendence,
Transcendental.
suffering, and the cycle of rebirth, a central idea in Buddhism.
I see. And the Nara Daibutsu.
That colossal bronze statue, it's Buddha Bhirushana,
Who's that?
a cosmic Buddha of light and wisdom.
I actually saw the Nara Daibutsu a few years ago.
Really?
Standing there, beneath something that massive, knowing it's been there for centuries.
You must have felt the weight of history.
It's a powerful experience.
And then we have the Bodhisattva.
Fill me in.
Not quite a Buddha yet.
Okay.
They choose to stay in the world to help others reach enlightenment.
Wow, that's selfless.
They represent compassion, delaying their own liberation for others.
Such a powerful concept. And when you look at the art itself, it's amazing.
What do you see?
You can see Greek influences in their idealized beauty.
It's interesting.
Indian jewelry, maybe even a halo from Persian Zoroastrianism.
You're right. It's like the Silk Road visually represented.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows how the Silk Road did more than move goods.
Right.
It blended beliefs and artistic styles.
As it went along.
All this trade, this exchange, it needed a massive network, right?
Absolutely.
Our Samarkand Readings 2023 breaks down how it all worked.
I'm all ears.
We're talking 3 main sections.
Okay, what are they?
The Eastern section,
Sardinia?
China, then the Central Asian section, Samarkand,
Yeah.
and then the Western section, reaching the Mediterranean.
Spanning the world, basically.
One thing that stands out, trade wasn't a straight shot.
Interesting. What do you mean?
Goods moved like a chain from one trader to the next.
I see. Taking turns.
Not everyone traveled the whole route.
So more like a relay race?
The source calls it peddling trade.
Tell me about that.
Traders went from market to market.
Buying and selling along the way.
They even bartered, trading goods without using money.
Wow. Can you imagine the negotiations?
And the energy in those marketplaces.
Must have been incredible.
But it wasn't easy being a trader, right?
Not at all.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Financing those trips, shifting market conditions, assessing risks,
Constant challenge.
banditry was a huge threat, and budgeting was crucial.
For survival, even before profit.
Picture those caravans winding through the desert, camels loaded with silken spices.
It's an image that captures the imagination.
Traders sharing stories around a campfire.
Camaraderie in the face of hardship.
Adventure, risk, resilience.
And it wasn't just about economics, was it?
Right.
These caravans, they spread languages, customs, ideas,
Alongside the goods.
weaving together a more interconnected world.
And the sheer variety of goods traded. Amazing.
What kind of things are we talking about?
From the West, gold, pomegranates, woolen rugs, colored glass,
Those are some nice things.
jade. And from the East, obviously silk, but also gunpowder, chrysanthemums, compasses,
Everyday objects that were once exotic treasures.
traveling such vast distances.
And you know what? The source mentions diversification.
Meaning,
For traders, it was key.
makes sense, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Having a range of goods meant you could adapt,
Like modern-day entrepreneurs.
always assessing, pivoting to stay ahead.
The Silk Road wasn't static, was it?
Right. Always changing.
Influenced by politics, weather, even shifting tastes.
Dynamic system.
Speaking of changing tastes, let's talk silk.
Ah, yes. The heart of the Silk Road.
Our technology source dives into silk making.
It's more complex than people realize.
It was invented in China around 3000 BC.
A long time ago.
But get this, Europeans didn't learn how to make it for almost 300 to 500 years.
Wow, they kept that secret for a long time.
A seriously guarded secret. Silk was a status symbol.
Luxury, wealth, sophistication.
The source even says it was used as currency.
Really?
It's hard to believe.
That something so delicate could hold so much power.
Its impact wasn't just economic, though, right?
Right. Think about those intricate robes worn by Roman emperors.
Or the tapestries in European palaces.
Silk woven through history, connecting cultures and continents.
And silk wasn't the only thing.
What else?
Our technology source details those other Chinese inventions.
The ones that traveled westward?
Paper, printing, the compass, and gunpowder.
Each one revolutionized the world.
Paper changed how we communicate. Printing spread knowledge, especially after movable type.
Imagine the impact.
And the compass. What a change for navigation.
Explorers could venture further, map the world more accurately.
It connected distant lands like never before.
And then we have gunpowder.
A discovery that changed everything.
It transformed warfare, for better or worse.
Leading to firearms and shifting global power.
A reminder that even amazing inventions have unintended consequences.
Like we're at a crossroads,
Looking back at the Silk Road,
trying to figure out the best path forward with all our technology.
it's a fascinating parallel.
But before we get into that, let's remember the people.
The human element,
We've talked traders and scholars, but what about the everyday people?
the ones whose lives were touched by the Silk Road.
Whose stories aren't in the history books.
but were essential to its existence.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture,
Trade, technology, empires.
but it's those individual stories that bring it to life.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so captivating. It really is a tapestry woven with human ingenuity, ambition.
Resilience, connection,
Yeah,
spanning centuries and continents.
exactly. And one aspect that I always find fascinating
Yeah.
is the role of religion on the Silk Road.
We know Buddhism spread eastward.
But what about other belief systems? Did the Silk Road act as a conduit for different faiths?
It's a good question.
The Samarkand readings talk about this.
Okay.
Pilgrims and monks traveling those trade routes, spreading their beliefs as they went.
It wasn't just goods being traded then.
Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism,
All journeying along the Silk Road.
interacting with existing religions, shaping the spiritual landscape.
Like a spiritual marketplace.
Where ideas and beliefs were traded right alongside goods and technologies.
But it must not have always been peaceful, right?
You're right. It wasn't always harmonious.
Okay.
Religious rivalries and conflicts definitely arose too.
It's a reminder that those connections weren't always easy.
It highlights that complex relationship between faith, power, and economics,
So the Silk Road wasn't just a force for connection.
No. It was also a catalyst for conflict and competition.
It's a reminder that history is rarely straightforward.
Exactly. It's full of both cooperation and conflict.
Innovation and destruction. Now, what about the role of women on the Silk Road?
That's a fascinating question, and one that is often overlooked.
Were they just passive bystanders, or did they actually take part in this vast network?
Our sources don't paint a complete picture, unfortunately.
Okay.
But we can get glimpses into their lives during that time.
I can imagine women managing households, raising children,
Absolutely.
while their husbands were away trading.
Maybe even running businesses themselves.
You think so?
Women were essential,
True.
to the economic and social fabric of these Silk Road communities.
What roles did they play?
Key roles in agriculture, craft production, even trade.
I bet some even went on those long journeys with their husbands, right?
Absolutely. Facing the same risks and hardships.
Remember those bustling bazaars mentioned in the Samarkand readings?
Oh, yeah.
I bet women were right there in the thick of it,
Selling their own goods.
acting as intermediaries between cultures.
Facilitating trade.
Makes sense. Their role in trade was probably bigger than the official records say.
It's likely. After all, history is often told from a male perspective, isn't it?
Yeah. And women's contributions can be easily overlooked.
Minimized. Erased, even. But even with limited information, we can use our imaginations,
Right.
our critical thinking to piece together a more complete picture.
It reminds us that those historical sources aren't always complete or objective.
Exactly. We need to read between the lines, question those assumptions, consider multiple perspectives.
Now, here's something that might surprise people.
Okay, what is it?
The Silk Road wasn't just about luxury and exotic spices.
What else then?
It played a role in spreading disease, too.
Oh, right.
Not a pleasant thought, but it's a reality of interconnection.
The movement of people and goods along the Silk Road.
Yeah.
It facilitated the spread of diseases,
Like,
the bubonic plague, smallpox, measles. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
a harsh reminder that connection has a dark side.
Those same routes that brought cultures together facilitated the exchange of knowledge.
Yeah.
They also created pathways for disease, leading to devastating outbreaks.
The Black Death, which ravaged Europe in the 14th century.
Yes,
It's believed to have originated in Central Asia.
and spread westward along the Silk Road.
It's a reminder, isn't it,
A sobering one.
of our global interconnectedness, the challenges of managing health threats.
It highlights the importance of public health measures,
Right.
disease surveillance, international cooperation.
Especially in our modern world.
And it also underscores that complex relationship between human actions and natural forces.
Okay.
The Silk Road was a result of human ingenuity, ambition, but it was also shaped by factors beyond our control.
Why,
Disease, environmental changes. It's a balance.
as we celebrate the achievements of the Silk Road,
Yes.
it's important to acknowledge these darker aspects too.
And learn from the mistakes of the past.
So we've covered Chinese inventions, but what about other forms of knowledge?
Right. Did philosophical ideas, scientific discoveries, or mathematical concepts also travel along the Silk Road?
That's what I was thinking.
Our Baghdad guided tour highlights the House of Wisdom
Okay.
as a prime example.
It was a place where scholars came together,
From diverse backgrounds
To
to
just-
work on translations, scientific research.
engage in philosophical debates.
Can you imagine being a fly on the wall in those discussions?
It would have been amazing. Scholars from all over,
Poring over scrolls, debating theories.
pushing the boundaries of human understanding.
The House of Wisdom was a testament to intellectual curiosity.
And cross-cultural collaboration. It wasn't just about preserving knowledge, was it?
No, it was about generating new insights, making advancements.
In science, mathematics, philosophy,
It sounds like the ancient world's version of a think tank.
fueled by that diversity of perspectives brought together by the Silk Road.
Exactly. And its impact, it wasn't limited to Baghdad.
Really?
This knowledge spread throughout the Islamic world and beyond.
Influencing.
The development of universities, the course of intellectual history even,
It's amazing how knowledge can transcend borders like that.
and shape civilizations
It's a legacy that continues to inspire us, too.
in our interconnected world.
Yeah.
Collaboration, open dialogue, and the pursuit of knowledge are more crucial than ever.
Now, let's shift gears for a second and talk about the political landscape of the Silk Road.
Okay. The political side of things.
Empires must have been battling for control of these trade routes,
Right.
alliances made and broken, dynasties rising and falling.
It wasn't just about economics.
The Silk Road was a political battleground, too.
Absolutely. Control meant access to wealth, resources, strategic advantage.
The Samarkand readings even mention wars being fought over these routes,
The clash of armies, sieges of cities, political intrigue.
alliances constantly shifting.
The Silk Road played a huge role in the rise and fall of empires.
Which ones?
The Han Dynasty in China, the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, they all wanted control.
To gain those economic and political advantages.
It's like a giant game of chess,
With empires making strategic moves to control territories and trade routes.
And the game was always changing.
New powers emerging, old alliances crumbling.
The balance of power constantly shifting.
The Silk Road wasn't just a fixed route on a map, was it?
It was a dynamic landscape shaped by ambition and conflict.
Exactly. Understanding that political context is key to understanding its historical significance.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's bring it back to today.
Okay.
Are there any modern-day parallels to the Silk Road?
Ooh, good question.
Do we have similar networks of trade, exchange, cultural interaction?
I think the answer is a resounding yes.
Even though we don't have those camel caravans crossing deserts anymore,
Right. But we have global supply chains,
connecting continents.
moving goods and services at incredible speeds.
Think about the clothes we wear,
The devices we use.
the food we eat,
It's all traveled thousands of miles.
passing through so many countries before it reaches us.
And it's not just physical goods, right?
Right. The internet is like a digital Silk Road.
Connecting people worldwide, allowing information to flow freely.
Ideas, cultural products, moving at lightning speed.
It's a virtual marketplace.
Where borders are becoming less important, cultural influences are blending and evolving all the time.
And just like the Silk Road of the past.
Yep. These modern networks come with their own sets of challenges, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
What kind of things?
Fair trade, labor exploitation.
Environmental sustainability.
The impact of globalization on local cultures.
The lessons of the Silk Road seem more relevant now than ever.
Absolutely.
We need to approach these interconnected networks responsibly.
Right. Finding a balance between economic growth.
Cultural exchange and ethical considerations. It's a reminder that the story of the Silk Road isn't over.
It's still unfolding,
In new and unexpected ways.
shaping human history and reminding us of our interconnected destinies.
It's incredible to think how those connections, those exchanges, are still echoing today.
They really are.
And like you said, it wasn't just about emperors and those powerful people.
Right.
It was the everyday people whose stories we don't always hear.
Whose names might not be in the history books.
But they were essential to the Silk Road existing at all. Even with the sources we have, you can still find traces of their lives.
we can.
Think about those artisans,
Creating stunning silk textiles.
the translators who brought those ancient texts into new languages,
Meticulously working word by word.
musicians entertaining those tired travelers.
At the caravanserais, offering a moment of respite.
It's like a giant mosaic.
Ooh, I like that.
Each piece, each person, adding to this massive work of art.
Exact.
And even if we don't know their names,
We can still appreciate their skills, their creativity.
their role in shaping this incredible story. But we have to remember,
Yeah.
the Silk Road wasn't some utopia.
Right. It wasn't perfect.
There were hardships, injustices, inequalities. Slavery existed.
Economic exploitation.
Conflicts over resources, over who controlled the trade routes. It's a reminder.
That progress isn't always a straight line.
Right. And it's not without its shadows. As we learn about the Silk Road, we have to understand those darker parts, too.
Absolutely. Acknowledge the complexities, the contradictions that are part of being human.
History's rarely simple.
Never one-sided.
It's a mix of good and bad, progress and setbacks.
Yeah.
And understanding that
It gives us a better view of the past.
and how it affects us today. We've talked about the economic impact, the political side.
The cultural aspects.
What about the environment?
Ooh, that's an important question.
Was there an impact from this huge network of trade?
It's one that often gets overlooked.
Were there unforeseen consequences?
Well, detailed environmental records from that time are hard to come by.
Makes sense.
But we can make some educated guesses.
Okay.
The Silk Road probably had both positive and negative impacts on the environment.
How so?
Think about it. Deforestation
To build roads,
for new settlements.
resources being depleted to make all those goods for trade,
Exactly.
maybe even invasive species spreading because of all this stuff being moved around.
You're thinking along the right lines. The Silk Road moved plants, animals,
Even diseases,
across huge distances.
which could mess up ecosystems.
Unintended consequences are a real thing.
And I'm guessing certain items like silk or those exotic spices,
Yeah.
they were in high demand. It must have put pressure on natural resources,
Leading to overexploitation.
habitat loss.
Possibly. But on the flip side,
Yeah.
the Silk Road spread agricultural knowledge too.
Sharing good farming practices.
New techniques,
Right.
which could have led to better food production.
More sustainable land management.
In some areas, yes. So it's complicated.
Benefits and drawbacks.
It's a balance.
It makes you think about those consequences, right?
It really does.
Especially for global trade today.
Especially with how interconnected we all are now.
The Silk Road shows that our actions have this ripple effect.
Absolutely.
They go way beyond just us. Environmental sustainability is a big deal.
It really should be front and center in everything we do.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the Silk Road,
It's been quite a journey.
what are some final thoughts, something for our listeners to take away?
I think the key takeaway is that the Silk Road wasn't just a moment in time, it's part of who we are as humans.
Okay.
It shows our curiosity,
Our desire to connect
our drive to innovate.
and our ambition to leave a mark on the world.
It really does. It's a story that shows us both the best and worst of humanity,
Right.
reminding us how interconnected we are and how important it is to create a future where everyone benefits from that connection.
In a way that's fair,
Equitable.
sustainable.
Absolutely.
And it's a story that's not over yet
It's still being written.
as we navigate our world today.
More interconnected than ever.
The lessons of the Silk Road are more relevant than ever.
We can learn from the past.
Embrace the opportunities.
Work towards a future where understanding and cooperation are the bridges that connect us.
A future where continents are linked, not just by trade.
But by peace, prosperity, progress for everyone.
Beautifully put. It's been an amazing journey exploring the Silk Road, and I hope our listeners are leaving with a sense of wonder
A thirst for knowledge.
and a deeper appreciation for how interconnected our world truly is.
And maybe even a little inspiration
Inspiration to do what?
to embark on their own journeys of discovery. Whether it's exploring a new culture, learning a new language.
Or just connecting with someone from a different background.
The Silk Road shows us that our world is full of amazing things to discover, and that human connection is the thread that binds us all.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Silk Road. Until next time,
Keep exploring
keep asking questions.
and keep connecting.
Welcome to our deep dive into the Silk Road. We've got some incredible stuff to explore. History, art, even some fascinating insights into early technology. It's all connected.
You know, it really highlights how interconnected our world has always been, even centuries ago.
It does, doesn't it? And that's exactly what we'll be uncovering today. It's not just about what the Silk Road was, it's about how it shaped the world we live in. We're going to meet the people who walked its paths, explore the ideas that traveled along it, and just discover, well, how far its influence reached, really.
It's almost like having a personal guide through time across continents.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. Our first stop is 8th century Baghdad. Now, this was during the peak of the Abbasid dynasty. And Baghdad, it was this incredible, bustling desert metropolis.
Our sources describe it as surpassing even Rome in size and grandeur. It was a true center of global trade and scholarship at that time.
I can only imagine. Bustling streets, beautiful architecture. It must have been quite a sight to behold.
It really was. And right at the heart of it all was the House of Wisdom. Now, this wasn't just a library. It was a vibrant hub where scholars from all over the world came to study, translate, and debate.
You mentioned scholars from all over the world. Just how diverse are we talking?
We're talking Muslim, Christian, Jewish scholars, all working side by side, translating texts from Greek, Sanskrit, Pahlavi, you name it. A true melting pot of knowledge and cultures.
That's incredible. So within this House of Wisdom, what kind of groundbreaking work was being done?
Well, one figure who really stands out is Hunayn ibn Ishaq. He was a Muslim physician. And get this, he produced these groundbreaking medical texts, complete with anatomical drawings.
Anatomical drawings back in the 8th century. That's pretty impressive.
It is. And his work, produced right there in the House of Wisdom, went on to influence both Western and Eastern medicine for centuries. So you can really see how this knowledge from Baghdad flowing along the Silk Road impacted medical practices across continents for centuries. Quite a legacy.
It is. Speaking of the Silk Road itself, how does Baghdad connect to this vast network of trade routes?
Well, Baghdad held a very strategic position. The Silk Road wasn't just one road, as you know. It was this whole network of routes. 3 major sections, actually. The Eastern Silk Road going through China and Central Asia, the Southern Silk Road going through South Asia and Southeast Asia, and then you had the Western Silk Road, reaching all the way to the Mediterranean.
Okay, so 3 main routes, with Baghdad right at the crossroads. But how did trade along this complex network actually work?
Think of it as a chain of trade. So goods, they would change hands multiple times as they journeyed along the Silk Road. Each merchant would decide which routes to take, which goods to carry, always weighing the risks involved: bandits, weather, all sorts of challenges.
So these traders, they weren't just merchants, they were almost like the venture capitalists of their time, weren't they? Betting on new routes and products.
Exactly. And they traveled in a variety of ways, sometimes alone, but most often in caravans, especially for the longer, more dangerous journeys. Safety in numbers, right?
Right. Imagine planning a journey like that, having to assess market conditions, barter strategically, and, navigate all sorts of cultural differences along the way.
Absolutely. It was a challenging but incredibly rewarding endeavor. And, when we think of trade, it's called the Silk Road. But I'm guessing silk wasn't the only thing being traded.
I would imagine not.
You're absolutely right. While silk was, a major commodity, especially prized in the West, the Silk Road facilitated a much broader exchange. A wide range of goods, technologies, and ideas were flowing along these routes.
Okay, so beyond silk, what else was moving along these routes? What would have been considered highly sought after?
Well, from the East, you had spices, porcelain, jade, tea, all highly sought after in the West. But, and this is important, the Silk Road wasn't just about, luxurious goods. The flow of technology and ideas was just as important, maybe even more so in the long run.
Now we're talking. Give me some examples of these groundbreaking technologies. What was being exchanged?
Well, our sources point to 5 major Chinese inventions that traveled westward along the Silk Road: silk making, paper, printing, the magnetic compass, and gunpowder. Imagine the impact of each of those.
Each of those is a game changer. Paper enabling knowledge sharing, the compass aiding navigation, and gunpowder.
Well, that transformed warfare, didn't it?
It did. It wasn't just about cannons either. Gunpowder changed siege warfare, army compositions. Even the balance of power between nations was affected by gunpowder. But of course, these things didn't happen overnight. Some technologies, despite their potential, took centuries to be fully understood and adopted.
It's almost like planting seeds. Some sprout quickly while others take their time, but the impact is undeniable.
Exactly. And while these inventions were spreading westward, you also had innovations like techniques for celestial navigation traveling eastward from the Arab world. So it really was this two-way exchange, a testament to how interconnected the world already was back then. It is mind-blowing. But all this talk about trade and technology makes me wonder about the people themselves. Did the Silk Road have any role in shaping their lives and beliefs?
Absolutely. And one of the most significant examples of that is the spread of Buddhism.
Ah, yes. We touched on this earlier. But how did Buddhism, originating in India, spread across such vast distances? Was the Silk Road the main factor?
The Silk Road played a crucial role, without a doubt. Buddhist monks and pilgrims traveled along these routes, you see, carrying their teachings and scriptures with them. They established monasteries, interacted with local communities, and in doing so, gradually introduced Buddhist beliefs and practices to new areas.
So it wasn't like a sudden takeover, it was more of a gradual process.
Exactly, a gradual process of cultural diffusion. And as Buddhism spread, it adapted to local contexts, incorporating elements of existing beliefs and practices.
It wasn't a one-size-fits-all kind of religion then. It evolved, took on different forms as it traveled along the Silk Road.
Precisely. And it's fascinating to see how Buddhism became integrated into different cultures, blending with local traditions and beliefs, and this is reflected in the art as well.
The art, you mean Buddhist art. Tell me more about that. What kind of art are we talking about?
Well,
And what makes it so special?
you have stunning examples of Buddhist art all along the Silk Road. For example, the Gandharan sculptures from the Northwest, which show clear influences from Roman styles. And then you have the magnificent Nara Daibutsu statue in Japan, a testament to how far Buddhist influence reached.
From the Northwest to Japan, that's quite a spread. Is there anything that stands out to you as particularly interesting or unique?
One of the most fascinating things about Buddhist art along the Silk Road is its symbolism. For example, you'll see depictions of the fasting Buddha, representing his period of asceticism. Then you have sculptures showing the final nirvana posture, a key concept in Buddhism.
So the art itself isn't just beautiful, it's packed with meaning. It traveled alongside the religion, offering a visual representation of Buddhist beliefs. What about those bodhisattvas, the figures adorned with elaborate jewelry? What did they represent?
The bodhisattvas are fascinating. They represent enlightened beings who choose to stay in the world, specifically to help others achieve enlightenment. And the elaborate jewelry symbolizes their compassion and their role as guides and helpers.
It's incredible to think about how these artistic representations, along with the religious ideas they embody, traveled along the Silk Road, shaping the spiritual landscape of entire regions.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about the spread of Buddhism itself. The Silk Road fostered a spirit of cultural exchange, an openness to new ideas that we can still see today. It challenged people to look beyond their own borders, to engage with different ways of life, different beliefs, different forms of art and expression.
It's like the Silk Road was this, masterclass in cross-cultural communication and understanding. Centuries before, things like study abroad programs or international travel became common.
That's a great way to put it. And those lessons in cross-cultural understanding are more relevant than ever in our increasingly interconnected world.
So we've got trade, technology, religious, and cultural exchange. The Silk Road was clearly more than just a way to get goods from point A to point B.
Much more. It was a complex network that touched every aspect of life for the people who lived along it. And its influence extends far beyond its historical time frame.
It really makes you wonder what it would have been like to experience the Silk Road firsthand, to walk through one of those bustling bazaars surrounded by such a mix of cultures.
Well, our sources describe these bazaars as sprawling markets, sometimes stretching across entire towns. You'd have the sounds of bartering, the sense of exotic spices, and just this kaleidoscope of colors from fabrics and goods from every corner of the world.
That sounds like a sensory overload.
Oh,
In the
right.
best possible way, of course.
It was a true melting pot of humanity. And just one example of the many ways the Silk Road brought people together and shaped the world we live in today.
I already feel like I've learned so much, and we're just getting started. I can't wait to see what other insights our journey along the Silk Road will reveal. So we've been talking about these incredible exchanges happening along the Silk Road, all this cultural and technological exchange. It's amazing to think about the ripple effect this must have had across continents.
It really does make you realize how interconnected the world already was back then.
It does. But with all this focus on, empires and these grand historical narratives, I'm curious about the impact on everyday people. How did the Silk Road actually affect the lives of, the people who lived along its routes?
That's a fantastic question, and it's something our sources address directly. You see, the Silk Road, it wasn't just this abstract historical event. It had a real tangible impact on, individuals and communities.
So it wasn't just about emperors and grand strategies. It was about, the lives of everyday people.
Absolutely. For instance, let's consider the local economies. Our sources talk about towns along the Silk Road that flourished specifically by catering to the needs of these traders passing through, providing food, lodging, animal care. It was a whole ecosystem, really, built around supporting those traveling on the Silk Road.
I see. So for these towns, the Silk Road wasn't some far-off concept. It was their livelihood. It put food on the table, kept their businesses going.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about economics either. Think back to those bustling bazaars we were discussing earlier. Imagine all the social interactions that must have taken place there. Local artisans selling their wares, families coming to shop for goods they couldn't find elsewhere, travelers from, faraway lands sharing stories and news.
It's almost like those bazaars were, I don't know, the social media of their time, a place to connect with people from all walks of life, learn about new trends, share experiences.
That's a very insightful comparison. And speaking of trends, let's revisit one of the biggest cultural shifts facilitated by the Silk Road, the spread of Buddhism.
Right. We talked about the art, but how did this religion, originating in India, actually travel across such vast distances? It must have been, more than just merchants carrying goods, right?
You're absolutely right. It wasn't just about trade. Buddhist monks and pilgrims played a huge role. They traveled the Silk Road, carrying their teachings and scriptures, establishing monasteries along the way, and importantly, interacting with the communities they encountered.
So it wasn't like Buddhism just suddenly took over. It was more of a gradual process.
Exactly. It was a gradual process of cultural diffusion, with Buddhism adapting to local contexts as it spread. Even the art itself reflects this. You can see how Buddhist iconography blended with local artistic styles, creating these unique regional variations.
So almost like as Buddhism traveled along the Silk Road, it was picking up, different flavors,
Mhm.
incorporating elements of the cultures it encountered along the way.
That's a great way to put it. It wasn't this monolithic force. It was dynamic, adaptable.
I like that. Now, I'm curious about the technology transfer. We talked about inventions traveling westward, but did anything flow from the west to the east? Any examples of that?
Absolutely. Our sources highlight a fascinating example: celestial navigation. Arab sailors, already skilled in using the stars to guide their ships, brought their knowledge and tools to Chinese ports.
So while goods were flowing from east to west along the Silk Road, you have this knowledge about the stars flowing in the opposite direction. That's pretty cool.
It is. And our sources even suggest that this knowledge wasn't confined to seafaring. Some caravan captains on the Silk Road learned to use these Arab navigation techniques to guide their journeys at night. It shows how the Silk Road could be a conduit for, very practical knowledge, things that could actually improve people's lives.
It really challenges our modern assumptions, doesn't it? Centuries before the internet or airplanes, the world was already deeply interconnected.
It was. And, that interconnectedness, it wasn't always about instant change. Remember our discussion about gunpowder? It traveled westward along the Silk Road, but its full impact, it took centuries to really be realized.
Right. It wasn't an overnight revolution. It took time for people to understand its potential.
Yeah.
And for the technology itself to, evolve.
Exactly. It's like planting a seed. It takes time for it to grow and bear fruit. The Silk Road wasn't just a conduit for immediate change. It was also a catalyst for this slow, gradual dissemination of ideas and innovations that would ultimately shape the future in profound ways.
So we're really talking about these long-term impacts.
Yeah.
Like sowing the seeds of cultural and technological change. Seeds that would continue to grow and evolve long after the Silk Road itself declined.
Precisely. It's a powerful reminder that historical events, they don't exist in isolation. They have these ripple effects that can be felt for centuries.
I'm starting to see the Silk Road not just as a trade route, but as this complex web of interactions, this web that shaped the course of history and left its mark on cultures all across the globe.
And that's exactly the kind of understanding we're aiming for. And as we wrap up our journey, it's important to look at the Silk Road's legacy. How did this network, which flourished for over a millennium, ultimately shape the world we live in today?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, we've talked about all these amazing exchanges, but how do they translate into a lasting impact, on a global scale? We've covered so much ground in our exploration of the Silk Road, from those bustling bazaars to the spread of inventions and beliefs. It's clear this was so much more than just a trade route.
It really was a catalyst for global exchange, shaping economies, but also, as we've seen, cultures and technologies.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up our deep dive, I keep thinking about its legacy. I mean, we've talked about its influence, but how did this network that thrived for, over 1,000 years, how did it actually impact the world we live in today?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Like trying to trace these threads of connection from the past to the present. Well, let's start with the trade itself. The Silk Road, in a way, established this model, this framework for global trade networks, demonstrating really the power of connecting these different regions, allowing this flow of goods, ideas, people, and that model still resonates today.
So you're saying even Our modern globalized economy with its intricate shipping routes and online marketplaces, it has roots in the ancient Silk Road.
I think so. You could argue that the Silk Road provided this early framework showing how interconnectedness could fuel economic growth, and foster cultural exchange. It's like it sowed the seeds for a more interconnected world, paved the way, in a sense, for these complex global systems we see today.
Okay, that makes sense. But the impact wasn't just economic, was it? Did the Silk Road leave a lasting legacy beyond just trade?
Absolutely. Just think about the spread of Buddhism. It's now one of the world's major religions, practiced by millions across the globe. And while its reach isn't solely due to the Silk Road, this network, it was instrumental in transmitting these Buddhist teachings eastward, really shaping the spiritual landscape of entire regions.
Right, so we're talking about this lasting impact on, well, on belief systems and spiritual practices. That's incredible. It wasn't just goods changing hands. It was about the transmission of these ideas that would influence the lives of countless people.
Precisely. And it's not limited to, specific religions. The Silk Road, I think, cultivated this spirit of cultural exchange, this receptiveness to new ideas that still resonates today. It challenged people to broaden their perspectives, to engage with diverse ways of life, different beliefs, art forms, expressions.
It's fascinating to think that, centuries before things like study abroad programs or even just like widespread international travel, the Silk Road was already offering this, this crash course in cross-cultural communication and understanding.
That's such a great point. And those lessons, in cross-cultural understanding, they're even more relevant than ever, I think. In our increasingly interconnected world, it really underscores the importance of communication, empathy, and the ability to bridge cultural divides.
Absolutely. I'm convinced now. The Silk Road wasn't just this historical event. It almost offers a blueprint for how interconnectedness can shape our world, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? I mean, were there any downsides to all this global exchange? Did these connections have any, negative consequences?
Yeah, you bring up an important point. The Silk Road, like any complex historical phenomenon, I guess, it wasn't without its challenges. Our sources, they make it clear that trade involved risks. Dangers posed by bandits, unpredictable weather, potential economic losses from shifting market conditions. These were all realities for those who participated.
And it wasn't just individual risks, was it?
Yeah.
Weren't there, conflicts, power struggles over who actually controlled these valuable trade routes?
Oh, absolutely. Our sources mention governments imposing taxes on trade and different groups, vying for control of key locations along the Silk Road. Its economic and strategic importance inevitably led to, I think, competition, conflict, and at times, even exploitation.
So it wasn't this perfect utopia. The Silk Road, like any human endeavor, was shaped by, ambition, power dynamics. It's important to acknowledge both its positive contributions, but also, these more complicated aspects as well.
Exactly. Recognizing that complexity, I think the progress and the exchange alongside these, instances of conflict, inequality, that's key to really understanding the Silk Road's full historical significance. It reminds us that interconnectedness, while it offers great potential, it also requires, I think, this careful, responsible navigation.
We've certainly journeyed far in this deep dive, from, the markets of Baghdad to the influence of Buddhism, the enduring legacy of global trade. Looking back, what stands out to you as, the most significant takeaway?
For me, I think it's this realization that even back then, even in the ancient world, humans, they were driven by this deep desire to connect, to explore, exchange knowledge. The Silk Road, it wasn't simply about commerce. It was about pushing boundaries, expanding horizons, geographically, intellectually.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a powerful reminder that interconnectedness has been shaping our world for centuries, really highlighting the importance of curiosity, collaboration, and just this constant exchange of ideas.
And that legacy continues to resonate today, even now. As we all navigate an increasingly complex and interconnected world, I think the lessons of the Silk Road, these lessons of the value of cross-cultural understanding, the importance of balancing opportunity and risk, the awareness of both the unifying and divisive forces at play, these things remain incredibly relevant.
Those are powerful lessons. And to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder, imagine you're a trader setting out on the Silk Road. What one item would you choose to carry with you? And why? What stories might you encounter along the way? And what knowledge would you hope to bring back to your homeland? Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey along the Silk Road. Until next time, keep exploring.